Hey, welcome to another episode of the DTC Insider podcast. I'm Roisentul, your host, and today I'm going to interview Seun Olubodun. He's the founder of Duke and Winston, a company that's building the only dedicated product, content, and lifestyle brand dedicated to the iconic English bulldog and bulldog lovers worldwide. That's amazing. So it's a pleasure for me to have you here, Sean. Thanks for being on the show.
So yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. I said it right first, Shane. So I told you Sean later. Sorry for that. But hey,
No, that's
Shane.
good. That's good.
Awesome. So why don't you tell the audience more about you and your story?
All right. Yeah. Like you said, my name is Seun Olubodun, and I'm the founder of Duke and Winston. And I launched the brand originally in 2010, so it's been a while. And back then, I was working at a web design agency, and my job was just client services. So it was my job to go out and find clients. Is not really a great job. It's like a job right out of school, um, picking up clients. But I always felt like I wanted to do something more. The idea of like going out, closing a client, going out, getting another one was a little tough. And the category that we were in, we were working with a lot of fashion brands. We were working like with a lot of artists, and I would just kind of see, you know, brands and stuff that would develop either art or like merchandise, and then they could like create one thing and just sell it over and over again. Like one T-shirt design can sell a lot of it. Where what we were doing, we were a very, very small shop. There was only like five of us. I have to go out, close the client, that whole process, start over. And so I kind of told my team that I thought that we could start our own brand, and I didn't know what it would be, maybe an apparel brand, but some kind of product, and then use all of the skills that we were using for other people, to kind of build our own thing. They weren't really interested, and so I spent maybe about 6 more months there, and I just was like, I'm going to figure something out. Um, I had actually been visiting a potential client in Boston, a brand by the name of Johnny Cupcakes, and I saw what he had done with his brand, and he just built this very like Boston centric brand that was had such a crazy following because people would like line up and like camp out outside the store when he had like product drops, and I was just like, yeah, this is a really cool concept. And I was in Philadelphia at the time, and I was just like, yeah, I want to do something like this, in the city. Um, Back then, again, I had no fashion apparel background. All I really had was I had an English bulldog. His name was Duke. I'd moved to the U.S. from England when I was like much younger, so this kind of British sensibility. Um, but grew up mostly in Philly, so I kind of loved Philly too. So I just kind of like mashed it all together, to be honest. Came up with a logo, which was my bulldog, and then Winston Churchill, which the British bulldog, that was his nickname. So I just took the two names, Duke and Winston, and just kind of combined them together. Um, Back then, there was no concept. My first T-shirt was actually just like a graphic of my bulldog's face and like a crown on, and I think I figured out how to print 100 shirts, and I would just sell them at like little street events in Philadelphia. Sometimes you'd make no money, sometimes you'd sell 5 shirts. It was essentially just like a joke. But I kept going. Friends would buy them. I'd print 100 shirts, 300, and it started to kind of grow from there. One thing I noticed when I would do these little street events was people that had dogs would come up to my table, and I always had my bulldog with me, and they were just obsessed with it because the idea that my actual dog was on a product. Everybody that has a dog kind of wishes their dog was famous or was on stuff, so that would instantly draw people to the brand. So right away I was like, okay, I've got something here. And so as I started to kind of figure out product, just started making stuff for people and their dogs. It wasn't bulldog focused at all. But I would make leashes, collars, I figured out how to make dog beds, and I would make most of this stuff locally. I find local manufacturers. So profit was not like my main concern back then. I was just kind of figuring it out. And I became kind of a trunk show brand. So I was doing, I would do in the summertime, especially, I would do maybe 50 or 60 trunk shows, like, over the summer, and just any festival, any street event, living on the East Coast of Philadelphia, like between New York and, you could go all the way down to DC even further. There's a ton of events, and I would just find them, do them. I got an old van, that I spent like $2,000 on this van, put my logo on the side, and I would just do festivals. And that was it pretty much for the first couple of years. Just slowly figuring out what the brand was. Then in 2012, I had this little opportunity to, so my apartment used to be like a commercial zone space. So it was on a street with a lot of traffic, and it looked like a store from the outside, but it was like, it's where I lived. So I just, not very legally, just turned my living room into like a showroom. It was not legal. I would open the door on the weekends, and people would be walking by, and there's a lot of like restaurants and stuff on my block. So a lot of times while people were waiting to go into the restaurants, they would just see my door open, and my bulldog would be laying like in the door, and they would just kind of walk in, and it kind of turned into like a little shop. The city found out. I got into a little bit of trouble, but my landlord actually was like really cool about me doing it, because like this is a really, I took the carpet out of my living room and put in hardwood floors. Like he came and was just like, "What did you do? Like you completely turned like my building into like a little retail shop." But he was cool with the idea, and he helped me actually get the right commercial license. And so we got that, and I could actually put a sign out front. And so I lived upstairs. My kitchen was in the basement, and then my living room was like the store. It was like 300 square feet. And sometimes if there were 10 people in there shopping, it would be like you couldn't even walk. I mean, it was that small. But, it got me a lot of press. It got me, back then, 2012, a lot of blogs were still kind of a big thing. So a lot of local bloggers like picked it up. They were just like, yeah, this kid has like, his apartment is a store, like depending on what I ate for breakfast that morning, the whole store would smell like it. It was like that. But yeah, it got me a lot of local press. I got on like Metro. I think I got on like NBC, ABC, local, all the local news stations picked it up. They all came. I did, so based off the success of that, I did a Kickstarter really quickly, and I raised like, because before that I was completely bootstrapped. I mean, the money that I'd saved from work, I sold my car, I got $10,000 out of that, threw it all in. Um, I raised $30,000 on Kickstarter, which back then was like an immense amount of money, for me. And so with that, I hired my first kind of full-time assistant, um, and I started to streamline the product a little bit. Started to kind of do a little bit more manufacturing outside of Philadelphia. I didn't really fully go overseas yet, but I started to kind of branch out. Uh, Also, off the back of that, Urban Outfitters, which is based in Philadelphia, their headquarters in Philadelphia. Off the back of maybe from the press or from one of the trunk shows, but one of the reps came to me and they picked a line up. So that first T-shirt that I made with the crown, an updated version of it, they picked it up, and so they picked it up first for 20 stores. It was my first wholesale account. 20 stores as a test for 2 weeks. It did really well. 100 and something stores did really well, and then they wanted to like take it for all their stores, and which I turned down, and I can get into wholesale and why, but it really helped the brand. There was a lot of things going into wholesale that quickly. There's a lot to look out for, but since it was just one design, I could manage it, and the revenue that came in from it like really catapulted the business. So it was good that I did it, but there was I wasn't fully ready at the time. Like I was paying the most for my t-shirts. So my margins weren't where they would be if I did something like that now. You could essentially say I broke even, but just to have that influx of revenue was still really good. And so yeah, I that helped. I started to pick up smaller wholesale accounts. So like I pick up little boutiques here and there. Before long, I think I was in about, outside of urban, I was in maybe about 40, 50 little shops, and then Urban Outfitters, like, 100 of them. And 2014, opened like an actual flagship store. So I opened like a real retail store. I mean, like 2,800 square feet, right in the center of Philadelphia. I mean, Ralph Lauren was like 2 blocks down. J. Crew was across the street. So I was like in the heart of the city. Where I lived was kind of like in a hip neighborhood, like kind of 2 miles outside of the city. So this was like real retail. By then, the team was maybe like 6 or 7. E-commerce was not like a big focus. I had a website, things would sell online, but the retail side was like really the thing. And the brand was doing really well. I mean, revenue wise, double, 3, triple, like year over year. But no real focus. Like I was selling everything. Actually, when I moved to the really big retail store, I started to sell outside brands also. So it was this mix of like preppy clothing, t-shirts, polos. I thought I was gonna be like the next Ralph Lauren for like pet people. I would make like leashes and collars that would match people's belts. I'd make like dog beds, and it was all over the place. A lot of SKUs, um, you know, and it became really tough because while the brand was growing, and it was this like, it was probably the best known, like one of the best known like homegrown Philadelphia brands. Trying to like raise capital to grow was tough because I kept running into the thing with investors saying, yeah, we love it, but like, what is the brand? Like, you've got a really amazing retail store, like really amazing, but to scale it, like what is the focus? Like, and I would be like, well, what is Ralph Lauren's focus? Like he makes a lot of stuff, but trying to compare yourself to like a brand that at that scale is very different. And so it started to become really tough because my team started growing. Retail is a whole different business, like especially like real retail. Like my apartment store was not retail. Like this was retail. You know, um, Everything you've got to deal with, theft, insurance, everything. So it started to become a lot. It wasn't as fun as it was when it was just me and the dog in the van, like running around. To mitigate that, I decided to open a second store, thinking like maybe that would help, in like kind of a wealthy suburb of the city, open a second store. Revenue wise, it was doing well, but I was kind of, I was fairly burnt out. But, with that, the brand had grown. You know, I had a team of people, my mailing list was growing, social media was growing. I would do a lot of events. So even though the brand was like really for all dog people, I've only ever had bulldogs, and I'm like a really big bulldog person. And it's funny, I didn't even think back then to like focus. So sorry. So much later, sorry. My bulldog is under the table, knocking everything over. Um, so I didn't think to focus. So I would do these like little things, around the city. So I started up like a bulldog meetup. So essentially every month, get a whole bunch of bulldogs to meet. I'm really a really big bulldog person. So I would do things where at the store I would get like, I tried to get like 100 bulldogs to show up at the store on a Saturday. I think we got like 70 or 80, and the whole idea was to do like a walk through the city. But I don't, if you know anything about bulldogs, they don't. They're very stubborn and they're very lazy. A lot of them are fat and they just don't walk. So we made it about like 2 blocks, and all of these dogs just stopped, and it stopped traffic. It was again one of those things that I wasn't planning on, but it like went crazy. Like we ruined traffic in the city, but it got picked up. It got picked up again by
And then you
press.
made
Like
You made the news again, I guess.
Made the news again. Made the news again. Like this brand, like it made all the local news. I think I might have gotten a little hit on like Time Out New York. I got a little hit on like a national TV spot. Like just mentioned it. Like they were talking of, they were doing like little features on like local news things, and they got a little feature. American Express was doing like their big national campaign, picking like small businesses, and they picked maybe 10 small businesses around the country, and they randomly picked me to do it based off of that. So that all of that stuff was really, really good. Really growing the profile of the brand. But again, that lack of real focus. I was kind of like an entertainer type of person that just like had this brand. I didn't utilize. I back then I'd never been on Instagram personally. I had Facebook. I was my team, like, I had somebody that was running the Instagram, barely running it. Our Facebook had like 16,000 people. I'd never logged into it a day in my life. I was just kind of doing what I was doing, and kind of just, growing it back there. But again, not really the best way to if you want to scale a brand. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I grew it through to 2016. So I don't know if you want me to get into like when you want me to stop, or get into like, the
No,
relaunch and everything.
I was like very interested about what you were saying. I mean, it sounds like everything was happening for a reason, but not in an intentional way. I mean, many of this stuff. And you said that you said many times that you were doing things that weren't scalable. But as Alibaba's founders once said, just when you start a business, you need to do many non-scalable efforts in order to scale. And it sounds counterintuitive, but actually, if you think about it, if you test a few non-scalable things, you can actually learn and get a grasp on what's working and what's not working, what people love, what they don't, and then build a brand out of that, like improve the process, the products, the team, etc., to then scale. So I guess, I mean, in hindsight, that's what you did. You went to all the local and not so local events to showcase your products. You sold your car. You went all in. It's not something that was like a side gig in which you said, "Hey, I'm probably going to manufacture one or two t-shirts." Since you haven't, you actually went all in. You were invested in that. You were focused on the wholesale. You tried. It didn't work as you expected, maybe, and then you opened your store in your apartment. I think that was a smart move, because, I mean, if you don't have, let's say, the money or the possibility to open a store, well, and you have an apartment like on that people can access, when they are walking through I mean, on the block. That's something that is very smart. And I know many entrepreneurs. I mean, what entrepreneur doesn't get into trouble? I mean, I
Yeah.
haven't heard of one who doesn't, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and it's part of the entrepreneurship. And now it's a story that you can tell. And about that move with the Bulldogs, you made the news. That was a consequence, but that wasn't planned, let's say, maybe. But what was planned was building a community and having fun, getting bulldogs, in together, getting bulldog lovers in your store, all gathered, like 80 of them. That's something smart. You are building raving fans, and probably some of them will buy t-shirts, or many of them, or probably none of them, but you're sharing a passion in common. And that was uh, what you were looking for back then, right? And then it made it in the news, but it was a consequence of what you were looking for, which was building an awesome community. So I have a question for you. So far, I love the story. It sounds like you were having fun at some moments, and for some other moments you weren't having a lot of fun. You were, struggling with keeping up with all the, the retail stores, not with one, with two. how does the story continue? Because I know that uh, there's something unexpected for the audience here, given all the stuff that you're telling so far.
Yeah. So, by I would say like late 2015, I found myself with like a different type of, you know, business. Like I'd gone from my first year, I think I did like $7,000 in sales. And then by 2015, it was like 1.2 million, you know? And I had this team. I had one store. I hadn't even opened the second store yet. I had 65 something wholesale accounts, and I was responsible for all of it. I'm somewhat, not somewhat, I have, I have ADD. I have a lot of ADD. Like I'm a creative. I can come up with stuff and like execute and go on the fly and move, but structure and planning and like thinking way out ahead is like it was a struggle. And also, a team. There's a lot of things that I think that as an entrepreneur you don't realize till later, where especially when you're a single founder. So while I was doing all of that, being in Philadelphia, I either was acquainted with or kind of knew people that had started brands kind of like right when I did. The guys from Warby Parker were all like UPenn grads. And I watched them take Warby Parker and like blow it up. And a bunch of people like that. Dollar Shave Club. Um, and what I always saw with those guys is there was like a team, two guys, three guys, four guys. Many times they were like business school grads, but they all had like a skill set, and so they were able to kind of share the coursework. I mean, most successful brands, I feel like, are partnerships, and single founders, it can be really tough, especially like once you're years in, trying to sell somebody on your vision to come in and partner up with you, not like an employee, but to like actually share the course load for no, for equity and not the salary, it's difficult. And so by 2015, it was like, I was in that situation where, a team of 10, I'm responsible for the whole business. I had an operations person, but she was like my assistant essentially. She actually was, so my first employee that I hired after Kickstarter, she had now become like my operations head. But she was still really, and she really, really came up, but I was still responsible for everything. So my life essentially went from I think I would work maybe 20 hours a day. I got to a point where I actually stopped going to my apartment, which was about 2 miles away from the main store, and I would sleep in the main store. And it's funny, like now thinking back, I don't remember how I showered. I don't remember. And I'm assuming that I just didn't shower, which is kind of gross now. Like I didn't shower for 3 or 4 days, because there was nowhere to shower. And I wouldn't go home, and I would eat just fast food, like breakfast, Starbucks, like, and that was my life. I like gained a bunch of weight, and that was it. And so I would always just finances, like, so during the day you're keeping the business going. At night when everybody goes home, okay, I got to look at what we made, like how do I allocate money, like inventory, looking at our wholesale accounts, like trying to look at spreadsheets. So at night it would be like trying to keep the business going, payroll, all that stuff. And then during the day, it would be dealing with everything that came with the store. There's a lot of theft, very randomly, because very kind of like a high-end neighborhood. The people that you think would steal from you were not the ones that would steal. And like some little old lady, is like putting something in her bag. Like it was crazy. We had a winter once where it snowed so much that like the ceiling caved in right above where my inventory was, like in the back, and I lost like $10,000 worth of inventory. just like that. Um, the building I was in was really old. It was an old historical building. And so it was maybe built in like the 1800s, and the molding was still there. Like it was like an old Gilded Age mansion that they turned into like retail stores, like my entire block. But sometimes when customers would come in, the molding and the ceilings were really high. I mean, we're talking like 30, it was really, really high. The place looked like a cathedral on the inside. But molding would fall, so like, and it happened a few times, and I thought sometimes it didn't hit any of the customers, but I thought I would get sued. Like it would be a thing because people would be like, "Oh, this thing fell off the roof," and it was like that. My landlord didn't want to fix anything. Another really bad incident, couple that happened twice. We had this period where there was flash mobs, so like 400 kids would just bombard the center of town, and they would just smash windows and like break into people's. They just smash everything. It was just like a phenomenon. If you type in like Philadelphia flash mob, like it was like a thing. And a lot of the stores on my street, Boyd's, J. Crew, all those guys, their windows would be smashed. By the next day, they'd be back up. For me, it was like floor to ceiling windows, $4,000. And I'd be like, I can't afford this. So I would have to have everything boarded up, and so I got to a point where like, man, this is not what this is not what I thought business would be. Like this is it's and in business, the way my journey was this, because I'm pretty resilient, right? So I've read all the business books. I know like businesses, you go in this direction, you hit a roadblock, you fall, you pick up, you keep going, right? You just think it's like this path. You are not expecting when 10 things come at you from every side. You know what I mean? It's not like just a straight line that you fail and you pick up like a pattern. It's everywhere. And then you have periods where things are going great. And so mentally, it throws you for a complete loop. And so if you don't have, again, a partner to lean on, if you don't have an outlet, and also if you're someone like me that just doubles down and keeps working, you might not realize that you're burning out, but you're burning out because things start to lack and then you stop caring. So I found that I stopped caring. I was just like, I was afraid of for anybody to come and knock on my door because I'm like, what happened now? Like that's essentially what it was always. That was always a problem. But mind you, sales revenue is growing. Um, I wasn't really in the because there's things, of course, looking back. Well, what you could have brought in a consultant, hire like a. I actually had a lot of really high level people would come to me. There was a guy who was a COO of American Eagle. Um, he actually went on to like La Colombe and like help them grow. Like I had people come to me that were like, we can take over, but then it would be like, our salary, $150,000, full benefits. I'm like, I couldn't afford the people that were going to come. And so, yeah, I was like fully burnt out, and again, because e-commerce wasn't such a focus, it was like, how do I keep this going? So again, I made that last ditch decision. Let me open a second store. Maybe that'll help, and so I did that. I think that was maybe September of 2015. It was a total disaster. It was an outdoor mall, again, really high end. Didn't realize the traffic just wasn't there like it was supposed to be. So I would say by July of 2016, we had to get out of that lease quickly. And I had spent $50,000 maybe or more renovating the space. There was all of these rules of what we could do and we couldn't do. And it was like, oh, being in a mall environment is too restrictive. It's an outside mall, so it wasn't like inside, but it was too restrictive and the traffic just wasn't there. So that quickly, and luckily we got out the lease. I had to pay a ton of money, but I got out of the lease, brought all of the inventory, everything back into the main store. And then my timeline might be a little bit off, but the nail in the coffin was, so the Pope came to visit Philadelphia. And so my timeline might be a little bit off because I think this was in late 2015. So I'd already moved everything back into the store and everything then. So the Pope was coming to Philadelphia, and we were expecting 2 million people. 2 million people were going to come. You know, it was so hyped up. So inventory, it was like, let's go all in. Now, again, I had a lot of excess stock and everything anyway. I forget how much of extra inventory I bought, but you know, tens of thousands, maybe $100,000, or close to it. Borrowed, all of that. The city decided to put these big barriers, the big cinder block, like through. So they forced all of the 2 million people to stay on one side of the city, and the hotels, the retail, the food, they kind of like blocked everything. So when I tell you that this is no exaggeration, that weekend of the Pope's visit, when I tell you that maybe 10 people walked into the store, that's not even 10 people. Now, a lot of people went out of business. This was like a big thing in Philadelphia because it was like the city just screwed us. Like they didn't allow these people that came to like be exposed to the city. They kept them on. There's a thing called the Parkway where everybody would be, and then there was like another side. And so it is like essentially these people came to the town. They came for the Pope. They didn't flow in. They didn't come into any restaurants. They didn't come into any bars. They didn't shop, and they left. So the people that overextended, you know, overbought, over whatever, out of business. And so for me, I was like, what am I going to do? I owed all of this money, and it was a little bit of a disaster. So I could have probably come up with some solutions and stuff, but when you combine everything together, I was done. And very abruptly, you know, thinking back now, it's like, man, it's crazy that I did this, but very abruptly, I just was like, we're done. You know, like I'm sick of this. It was a little bit of a process, you know, had like a bunch of really massive sales, you know, customer base, they supported, people came and bought, but I still had a lot of inventory at the end. My team, like, you know, luckily a lot of them have gone on to work for really cool brands, and, you know, but just shut it down. You could say it was like burnout, like whatever it was, but like I was done. And so by that time, I think that was maybe February or March of 2016. Like I shut it. It was like that. You know, like from the customer standpoint, the website, everything was just like this really growing brand was just done. You know, my wholesale accounts, and I was maybe like my early 30s, mid 30s, and early 30s, and I just actually, my parents they lived right outside of Boston, and I was in Philadelphia, and I went to my parents' house, and I didn't leave the basement for like 6 months. I just like laid down. So I was like, what happened? And in that time, like I still had to deal with wholesale accounts. Like we want more stuff. So I still had to like wind things down, but I just kind of disappeared. And like for 6 months, just was like, I had to like sleep, you know, because I was I was 40 pounds. Oh, I gained 40 pounds, all of my stomach. I was so unhealthy. My blood pressure was up. Like I was drinking every night just to like do like financial work, you know? And so when I went up to my parents, I was just like, man, I need to like disconnect fully. And so, yeah, and I tell that story because I think sometimes I was embarrassed by it for a long time, but people need to hear it because it's like I have these pictures, and I have a lot of pictures from that time, and I have a really great picture of when I opened the store. The mayor, the deputy mayor of Philadelphia was at the store opening. Like we had like a ribbon cutting, and it was like there were 300 people waiting to come into the store on opening day. It was like immense, and I have a picture of me like smiling happy, and then I have a picture of me after the Pope incident standing outside the store, and it's just like I'm looking dead, you know, and that was in less than 2 years, you know, and that's one retail. but also entrepreneurship, like it can be a lot, people that have been through it, they all know what I'm talking about.
Everyone who says that entrepreneurship is easy and it's only a one-way road, like to success or failure, they haven't probably done built any business. They are just saying things out loud, right? Everyone who has ever built a business knows what this means. I mean, I can tell you like real quickly, I've been working on my own since 2008. I used to work for an American company. Back then, I have a degree in computer science. I was a developer. 2008 wasn't a great year for the US, right? So many many companies closed, and so this company, they closed the operations where I live, and basically I was out of a job, and then I started my own journey with clients in the US as well, and I started my agency later. But before the agency in 2013, I started two other companies. One did pretty well, and the other was a startup uh, with the investors and all that all the stuff. I was in my early 20s, and the company after 2 years and a half went broke, right? So you can imagine that roller coaster of emotions. We were like 40 plus people, investors, a board of directors. Like it was a thing, right? And as you said, we can recover if we have the right mindset. It's not easy at all. Months or years can go by, but we need to get up somehow. Nobody needs to, go beyond that point. It's dangerous at that point if you are alone, especially, right? So all the support you can get if you are going through that situation now, a friend, family member, anyone, anyone.
Yeah.
It's really important. And the good thing now, talking about the good stuff about the story, is that you reopened the business with a
Absolutely.
radical change, did you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and what you said is actually exactly right. So, I'm like bummed out, disappointed in myself, like feeling sorry for myself, like in my parents' basement. And one of my really good friends, he'd own a bunch of restaurants in Philadelphia. The same thing had happened to him. So he had left Philly years before, and he was out in LA. And so, he was talking to me, and he's like, "Man, what are you doing? Like you've built this thing, like you're known for this, like you got to shake it off, And he was like, "Come out here, like just come out to LA and just like unwind." So I moved out there, moved in with him. Really amazing. He lived in a place called Redondo Beach. Like he lived on the beach. So you walk outside of our apartment building, and the boardwalk is there, and the beach is like right there. From our balcony, you could see like dolphins in the water. It was cool. I learned how to surf. Like, it was amazing. And it like completely just woke me up, and then I got a job through another friend at a couple of companies. They did the same thing, but one of them was represent.com. And so they probably are still one of the largest merch companies for influencers and stuff. So everyone essentially, I feel like, starts out with represent until they decide that they want to do their own in-house thing. So like the James Charleses of the world, and I think like the Logan Pauls and because they're like a print-on-demand company. So you have your merch shop, you order the merch, we make it, and then ship it out. And so there's no holding of inventory or anything like that. Uh, from working there, though, I really realized something that I just didn't care. I'm like really big on community, and I think that my idea of retail and all of that was like I like people. I like talking to customers. And so I really discounted e-commerce. I also just didn't discount. Like I told you, I didn't have an Instagram account until personally, I'd never been on Instagram personally till 2018. I was like too busy. But then I realized, like, man, look at these. I didn't even know what influencers were. Like, I was, again, when you're just very focused on your business, you don't know what's going on in the world. Like, I had no idea. So I was like, I would see, and my job again, get clients. So I would interact with some really big influencers, and I'd be like, man, you've built a YouTube channel, you've got this audience, and all you do is entertain your audience, and then you have merch and just sells, And so when you think of retail and brands, like I'm old school, like I was thinking Ralph Lauren is how I look at like building as many stores as possible, on the most expensive street and place in the world, like. And I didn't realize that all these influencers are also retailers, but for them, they're just doing it a very different way. They have back when I was a represent, I think like little influencer houses were like kind of starting to get big. I think the people still using Vine and all that. And so it's like these influencers would get together and they'd want just figure out new ways to get like merchandise, and their stuff would just sell day and night. And so I was like, okay, so that's something that I really did not put any emphasis on with my brand. Like, I just didn't care. A lot of those crazy bulldog walks and stuff, I didn't document it enough to like get videographers. Like, of course they blew up because they got on like local TV, but imagine if like these were like on Instagram, like, there wasn't any TikTok back then, but like that's the stuff that goes viral. And then you sell thousands of products off of the back of stuff like that. So that was just kind of always rolling in the back of my head. I was out in LA for about 2 years, but my mind was not like there. After you've built your own thing, it's hard to be an employee, So I was just, everything I would do would just be like, oh, I could do that for mine, and I think I needed those 2 years to really rebuild my confidence, like whatever. But I knew, I had an entire audience and customer base that were like waiting, like I just disappeared, and I couldn't let go of the fact that I just disappeared. Like I really need to bring it back. And so I started really planning. You know, I would come to Dallas. So I'm in Dallas now. I came to Dallas a few times to look at. There was a manufacturing company that was like a print-on-demand company, and I actually came to look at them for the company I was working for. But I came out here and I was like, okay, there's a lot of manufacturing here. There's a lot going on in Dallas. I have some family. My parents, again, they'd actually moved from the Boston area right outside of Dallas. So I would come and I'm like, I kind of like it here. LA is great, but LA, I lived in Redondo Beach and my office was in downtown LA, and then another office in Hollywood. It would be 2 hours each way, to go 17 miles. So the LA traffic was and I loved it because I live at the beach and I didn't want to live like downtown or anything like that. But the commute, it's too much. So Dallas though was like, this is a good place to kind of restart. And I refused to go back home. I was so embarrassed to go back to Philly. Like, I needed a completely different place. And so yeah, moved to Dallas in 2019, with the idea of just figuring it out like slowly. I officially relaunched in 2020, right before the pandemic, and back down. It went back down to just me. Um, Online, I had to rebuy my domain name. Some guy in India bought it. Like, luckily, I didn't have to. He didn't charge me a lot. He gave it back to me. I lost some accounts. I had to get a new Instagram account. Like I had to start over, and people were just, and my mailing list. Thankfully, my mailing list was still there. On not Klaviyo, it was on something else, and I had to bring it over. So luckily, I had that, right? And so people were just so happy that I was back, and then I just slowly figured it out. One of the things that I realized was I learned who I was, right? So I am a creative. I'm not an operator, right? I'm not the type of person that is going to lead a brand and scale it and care about because the things that you have to care about, the numbers, like you have to be very structured. I'm not that. So these are things that like now I know who I am, right? So I'm like, what could I do with relaunching this brand that just utilizes what I can do best, but get the people that get it to a point where the people that will really know how to scale it can come on board, or make this a brand that doesn't need to scale because like you just it's like it works. Like I thought Duke and Winston was going to be $100 million Ralph Lauren. If I can build a $5 million brand that like I'm happy with every single day, do that. Figure that out first. And
There's
so
something I read. Sorry, one
no, yeah,
more thing. There's something I recently read that said something like, when you build the first business, you want to conquer the world. When you build the second one, you want to make money. you have that doesn't mean you cannot have a mission, a purpose, a vision, uh, or a noble cause, but you have more realistic expectations. I can relate to with what you said. You haven't more of like a similar thing in that startup I told you earlier about. I wanted to hire like the more people, the merrier. Like I had a business with 20 people, let's get 10 more. We needed help. It wasn't like just like that, but hey, we need one more people to help us with in this area, one more there, or two sales people to add to the team, and two more marketing people, and hey, let's do a photo shoot here, let's do whatever. And when you think about it, you have 40 people working for you. It was like the more the merrier. When I started the agency, it was the less the merrier. And
absolutely.
again, you don't want to conquer the world anymore. You still want to have like um, a purpose, a mission to help change some stuff, of course, but you have a way more realistic vision and a more well-defined scope and
Yeah,
expectations, I think, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I know. I think I went down this list of what I care about. One thing I did and I recommend for everyone, I got like I would say she's like a business therapist in a sense, like just somebody to help me organize and talk to a week, like the way people would go to therapy. I have like a business therapist, and it touches on personal stuff. And
No,
was that
coach.
yeah, business coach, yeah, but it actually can be even it's more than a coach because helping you break down like what you care about, like your mission. Because a lot of times entrepreneurs like we say things. I have a mission. I want to change the world. What do you actually mean by that? You know what I mean? Like, if you want to change the world, that's very difficult. And what does that actually, in reality, what does that mean? And like, so she helped me figure out what I care about and like what I actually want to do. And I realized that from the beginning, I'm a bulldog person. I've had four bulldogs my whole life. I threw, I ran that bulldog meetup in Philly. My logo, this is my logo here, which it's like a bulldog with a top hat and a bow tie, like Winston Churchill and the bulldog. Um, Everything, the stores that I had in Philadelphia, everything on the walls were bulldogs. My customers that had other dog breeds would always mention like, what is this brand like? Is this like, it seems like everything is bulldog related. Why isn't this just a bulldog brand? Back then, my idea was like, that's not scalable. Like a bulldog, like how big is that? Like I want to capture everything. I want all the dogs. This time around, I decided, you know what? I'm going to focus just on this breed. Um, I did some research, figured things out. There's 3 million bulldogs in the US. Actually, very recently, Bard or like Chat GPT or like whatever has been really helpful because sometimes data is hard to kind of find, but I've been able to use that to really get like really strong data. There's 15 plus million bulldogs in the world. And that's just like that people know of. There's a lot more than that, but like that on average, 3 million in the US. The bulldog is the number one mascot in the world. Like if you type like what is the most number one mascot for anything, it's the bulldog. Yale, Georgetown, University of Georgia, Western Bulldogs, an Australian team. They're the dog of England. The U.S. Marines, their mascot is a bulldog. They're the number one dog mascot for high schools in the world. And actually, out of all mascots, I think they're number two. Like an eagle is number one, a bulldog is number two. That's because of like what the bulldog stands for. Like they're this small, short, stocky dog, but like they don't give up. Like they're very courageous. They're funny looking. Like it's just there's something about bulldogs that even if you don't own a bulldog, everybody knows what a bulldog is. Like they're like almost like iconic. So with that, I was like, you know what? If I can own that, that's a good enough brand. And to be honest, it's taken me some time. Like I would say in the last 6 months that I'm transitioning to even fully owning that. But I've now made that full transition. And so what I'm doing with the brand now is really product line catering to bulldog owners and bulldogs. And having a bulldog, I know what all of having a bulldog is like having a child. Because of the way they are, their skin, their full. I spend 30 minutes a day cleaning his face, the folds, because that's everything is wrong with them. So, like, okay, there's problems there, right? They need wipes constantly. They need paw, all of this stuff that I could make and provide for the bulldog. Chewy.com is like, the place everybody goes to. Well, the bulldog category, I could just do that. Like take the bulldog category and have Duke and Winston start making that. When I ran the bulldog meetup in Philly, meetup.com is the platform that people use to schedule meetups for that. The San Francisco meetup is like 3,000 bulldogs. The New York meetup is like 2,500. Chicago is really big. Now they might not that many meet up every month, but a lot of them do. The Philadelphia one that I ran, sometimes we'd have 100, 150. So I'm going to create on the site where having the Bulldog customers can have profiles, and I'm essentially going to sponsor the meetups, like Duke and Winston sponsored meetups. I'm in the process of like developing a Bulldog festival. So once a year, the whole goal is might take a while, a couple of years from now, 2, 3 years from now, to have the largest gathering of Bulldogs in one place once a year. Have sponsors and stuff. Like it'll be like the Bulldog Festival by Duke and Winston. And so my idea thing now is really cater to that audience, right? Like really entertain them, like build around them, and then product side, having merchandise and then also products that like solve problems in bulldog world. There's also bulldog rescues because of how many bulldogs are very expensive to own, between $1,500 to $10,000 is what a bulldog can cost. They have so many health issues that people give them up a lot. So bulldog rescues are a big thing. There's a lot of bulldogs in rescue. So I've already started, I design merchandise and t-shirts for about 5 of the largest bulldog rescues that there are. So like a merchandise partner for them. So there's a lot just in that space that I can own. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. I got this little space. It's like my little bulldog lab, bulldog spirit lab. And, I'm kind of starting to shoot content and stuff here. It's just filled with all bulldog stuff. And, it's a very big change from what I was doing before. Funnily, I've had advisors and potential people from the past all pop up. And they're always the advice, what I get all the time is, this is such a small thing. Like you're spending all this effort on just this one breed. Like, you can scale this. Why just bulldogs? And I've learned to switch it all off. Like because I like that to the world, it seems like such a small niche thing. And I'm like, yeah, I think this is how you're supposed to build brands, that matter. There are some people that are capable, of building, the Bonobos, like all of these guys that like I kind of knew from like back in the day that built these $300 million brands. You have to be honest with yourself and say like, I'm not that. I'm not those guys. I don't have what they have. I don't have the mental capability of planning a $300 million brand. I'm very big on community. I'm very big on in-person Like I'm very big on that. I'm very big on making people happy and smile. And bulldog people are just like, it's so easy to get them to like be happy. And so it's so easy to like build a brand for that because my focus is so like narrow, you know. And if I do it right, it's still a $10 million space. If I start to do like I'm working on partnerships with the Bulldog schools, licensing deals, if those all work out, and it's a $20 million business, you know, like so there's still a lot to do within this bulldog space. And so, and again, this is all fairly new. Like I've made the transition over the last 6 months. It's even taken me since 2020 just to like really be comfortable being like bulldogs. But yeah, I'm on that journey now. The product line on the site is slowly changing to just cater to bulldogs, like home goods for bulldog people. I've done a lot of surveys with the customers and they kind of tell me what they want, you know, and then I just start to kind of like develop those products from there. Slowly starting to build a team. And yeah, the brand is kind of back. So which is good.
Awesome. I'm happy to hear that. And thanks for all the inspiring, I mean, for telling the audience about your inspiring story, because I think that people nowadays talk about the latest tactic to grow the paid ads presence or email marketing, but um, that's important. But people are going through a lot, especially these days, especially business owners, founders. So it's great to hear something like this from you because it gives them hope, or I hope it gives them hope. Yeah, at least it gives to me because it means that something might have worked in the past, but the fact that you decided to stop doesn't mean that it needs to last forever, and you can actually restart a business, relaunch, even if that means starting some efforts from scratch, such as your social media presence, buying, getting back your domain, etc. So that's that's really inspiring. But one thing that I don't want people to like overlook is the fact that you are really active in the Bulldog community, hosting meetups, attending events, trying to look for partnerships. That's something that is really important. If you truly care for something, you need to actually be active in that community, right? Otherwise, how you are supposed to be noticed by people in that community, right? So I think the community side is really important. We have discussed that many times in the podcast, but this is a new way of doing the community thing, like through the meetups and through the these refugees, not refugees, these how do you call them? Sorry,
Oh,
uh,
rescues.
the rescues, yes. So
Yeah.
those places. So that's awesome. So Shane, I really enjoyed the conversation today. I know we had planned way more things to talk about, but sometimes, we don't we don't understand what's really important until we get the full picture. So in this case, I think this is what truly matters, at least uh, in my opinion, for people to get as a takeaway from this episode. So I think that you did a great job at telling people your story and how you overcame that moment back a few years back. So I really enjoyed the conversation. And before you go, I wanted to ask you something that I really ask every guest that comes on the show, because that's also inspiration, or maybe that's where you got inspiration from as well. So in this case, do you follow someone in this space, or do you have any former boss or any mentor they want to give a shout out to?
Absolutely. So, Johnny Cupcakes, the brand that I mentioned earlier, everybody should look him up. Uh, John Earl, but Johnny Cupcakes is the brand. Very, very well known. Like from when I first found them, like, they'd open stores in LA and, he's been on the cover. I think he's been in like Fast Magazine and probably was in Inked 500 maybe for a while, but really, really great brand. Again, just the perfect example of building a brand that's fun that you love. Just a quick thing I'll say is his stores look like bakeries, and when you go to the store, it smells like cupcakes, and you go inside the store and there's ovens all on the wall, and the ovens open up and there's t-shirts in there, and it's like this is a guy that just built this brand based on like his way. There's no like, it's not like venture capital and any of that like stuff. And he's built a very successful brand by like fun and community. And like I said, there was a time when he would launch merch and there would be lines of people. Maybe 100 people would be lined up waiting to get in. Like, he goes in rounds and speaks at colleges and stuff about branding and how to, but to me, that's the example. Like I think I initially came from a world of just very business people. They were just trying to figure out how to corner markets and stuff like that. And Johnny Cupcakes' example to me is like, if you are the type of person that really cares about community, you want to build things like from the soul, like he's a guy that's done it. Like there's nobody else to look to but than him. So yeah, I give him a shout out for that for sure.
That's awesome. So if you are listening or watching this episode, if you're already at the DTCinsider.com, feel free to click on the episode and you will find the show notes, including this company he just mentioned, and everything relevant he just mentioned will be there in the show notes. Shane, I wanted to thank you again for being here on the show. And before you go, where can people go to find more about you and the company?
Cool. Yeah. So you can check out the website is Duke-Winston.com, Duke-Winston.com, and on all social media it's Duke and Winston. So Duke and Winston all written out. I haven't really gotten my personal presence going yet, but I will soon. But yeah, so for right now, just check out the business.
So thanks again for being here in the show. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much.